Well, we're stepping back slightly in the book of Esther this evening. This is ground we've covered before. But we're going to focus on something we didn't particularly look at when we went through these verses a few weeks ago. And that is the character of Zeresh, and the contrast between what we see of Zeresh in chapter 5 and in chapter 6. Zeresh, Haman's wife, in chapter 5, verse 14, well, let's read verse 13. Haman says, "Yet all this avails me nothing so long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting in the king's gate." And what does his wife do? Verse 14. His wife Zeresh and all his friends said to him, "Let a gallows be made, 50 cubits high, and in the morning suggest to the king that Mordecai be hanged on it." But now come down to chapter 6, verse 13. When Haman told his wife Zeresh and all his friends everything that had happened to him, his wise men and his wife Zeresh said to him, "If Mordecai, before whom you have begun to fall, is of Jewish descent, you will not prevail against him, but will surely fall before him." Our focus as we consider these verses is the danger of doing the easy thing. The danger of doing the easy thing. In chapter 6, verse 13, Zeresh knows that acting against the Jews, acting against God's people, leads to doom. If Mordecai, before whom you have begun to fall, is of Jewish descent, you will not prevail against him, but will surely fall before him. Did she know that in chapter 5? Maybe this seems a small detail in the text, but to put her words in chapter 5 and in chapter 6 next to each other invites us to ask that question. In chapter 5, Haman, her husband, wants Mordecai gone. And so she goes along with it. She encourages him. She says, do it in an extreme way. He's her husband. It's very difficult for a woman to disagree with her husband about something he really wants to do. More than that, he's wealthy and powerful. He boasts so much about all he has because he is one of the top men in the kingdom. He's the prime minister. He's the country's top political expert. He's second only to the king. And so when he wants Mordecai gone in chapter 5, and when he's so set on it, it would be incredibly difficult to say this might not be a good idea. It'd be incredibly difficult to disagree. Was Zeresh thinking in chapter 5, well, he's the policy expert. He's the king's chief advisor. If he wants someone gone, who am I to say otherwise? He's so powerful. If I oppose him, I might be next. He's so wealthy. I want his favours. I want to stay in his good books. I want all of the blessings he can shower upon me. So I'll support whatever he says. Did she know at that point in chapter 5 the danger of going against God's people? Was it something that she knew really clearly, or was it perhaps something she'd put out of her mind? She'd learned about it some time ago, but it wasn't convenient to think on it at the moment, so it was just out of her mind. Does the shock of the events in chapter 6, do those remind her of what she'd forgotten? Or is it new knowledge? Did the events of chapter 6, or perhaps even the conversation in chapter 5, did that cause her to go out and do some study? To find out who these Jewish people were? Well, maybe, we don't know. We don't know. But what we do know is clearly it was information she could have had, because by chapter 6 she does have it. Was it that she hadn't done the work that she should have done? Or was it that it was just very inconvenient to say at that point in chapter 5 the things that she knew? Either way, what we see here is that it's very easy to go along with the crowd. It's very easy to forget what we know and to tune out things that we should listen to. It's very easy to tune out things that we should be thinking about when the expert in front of us is saying the opposite. Very easy to think, we must obey that politician, that authority figure. Doing the right thing might be a lot harder sometimes. Well, everyone's doing this. Who am I to say otherwise? Who am I to do otherwise? The end of World War II, many people who'd committed things that were called war crimes or atrocities said, well, I was only following orders. And that was generally not seen as any excuse at all. It's interesting also to compare Zeresh with Herod in Mark chapter 6. In Mark chapter 6 and verse 20, Herod feared John, knowing that he was a just and holy man. And also it says, when he heard him, he did many things. He heard him gladly. Herod liked to listen to John, the preacher of righteousness. He enjoyed listening to him. He heard him gladly. He knew that John was a righteous man, just as Zeresh seemingly knew the Jews were God's people. But Herod did not act on what he knew. He did not take John out of prison. He didn't repent of having taken his brother's wife. Zeresh went along with what was easy, gave her husband Haman very bad and destructive advice, put out of her mind the truth that she knew or should have known. Herod, like Haman, took foolish advice. Zeresh told Haman to have Mordecai killed and to build the gallows that in the end Haman would be hung on. Herodotus, via her daughter, tells Herod to kill John, killing the preacher, cutting Herod off from hearing the truth, from hearing the message that he needed. If we hear the truth and do not respond, there will come a time when it's too late. Zeresh went along with her husband's folly despite likely knowing better. Herod listened to the gospel but would not repent. And then it was too late. There's a great danger in continuing to do the easy thing. As we think about this, there's a range of situations in which it can apply. The most important, of course, is the spiritual application. It is incredibly dangerous to hear the preaching of the gospel, to hear the message of Jesus Christ, to enjoy hearing it, and not to act upon it. It is good to sit and hear the Bible preached. It is good to sit and hear Jesus Christ preach. But if you tune it out, if you simply enjoy listening as Herod enjoyed listening to John, there will come a day when it's too late. It is absolutely true, John chapter 3 and verse 16, that God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him will not perish but have everlasting life. Whoever believes in him, not whoever hears about him, not whoever enjoys listening to the message, but whoever actually trusts in him, whoever actually turns from other things to him. And so, there is a challenge, there is a question. Have you sat in church a long time, enjoying hearing? Or have you put your trust in Jesus Christ? This is a point from the oldest to the youngest. Are you actively trusting in Jesus Christ It's not enough to simply enjoy listening. It's not enough just to be here. You must respond. Herod enjoyed listening. He heard gladly. And then it was too late. Zeresh knew truth that she did not act on, and disaster followed. If you've heard of Jesus Christ, have you responded to Jesus Christ? Today is a good day to do so. There will be a time when it is no longer an option. But we should also think about this point in a whole host of other situations. It is very easy to go along with the crowd. It's easy to do what other people are doing. And as we think about the power of peer pressure, we should ask, to what degree are our lives being shaped by Christ? To what degree are our lives being shaped by the world around us? You can even ask the question in church, do we do the same thing as everyone else in church just because everyone else is doing it? Is there anything that we feel or we know, maybe that's not quite right, perhaps something different should be happening? It's very easy perhaps to go along with what your husband or wife is doing. Is it right? It's very easy to go along with what the church is doing. Is it right? It's very striking when you look at Herodotus' daughter in Mark chapter 6. She's given that same line by Herod that Esther was given by Ahasuerus. Up to half my kingdom, whatever you want. But there's some very important contrasts between her and Esther. Esther had prepared in advance. She'd prepared the banquet. She'd made a plan. We've looked in previous weeks about all the details of the somewhat complex plan that she'd seemingly laid out to undermine Haman and to accomplish a great good. Herodotus' daughter had made no plan. She was not prepared. She had to go out and ask her mother what she should ask for. Esther used that situation, used her preparations to save many lives, to defeat evil. Herodotus' daughter, unprepared, does a great evil, takes the life of a righteous man. Striking that the offer of up to half the kingdom was not enough for Esther, because she was taking on the man Haman, who had in effect already been given the kingdom as he was the prime minister. She needed more than was offered, hence some of the complexity of what she did. Whereas for Herodotus' daughter, there was nothing particular that she needed. She could have made some good use of it. She'd made no plan and she used it for a great evil. If we don't plan to do what is right, we'll very easily be dragged along in doing what is easy and what is wrong. So I reflect on this. There are so many things that come to mind. Thinking back in the last few years, in the evangelical churches, there have been a number of things that have gone under the very sanitised name of safeguarding failures. There have been situations where suspicions have been dismissed because that couldn't possibly be the case. Warning signs have been tuned out because, no, it's just, I can't believe such a thing. That wouldn't happen. Now, there are a lot of examples we could think about. Ravi Zacharias is one that some of you will know about. Not from this country, though he visited the UK several times. And he was so highly respected as this powerful, influential speaker. And so many people looked up to him, and he'd spoken on these large platforms, and he'd written so many books, supposedly. So people tuned out the public domain evidence that his CV was fake. People didn't pay attention to the very dodgy lawsuit he was embroiled in. And when other people made more serious accusations, just no one wanted to hear. The warning signs, the inconsistencies, no one wanted to hear. Because he was so popular. And because he seemed to be doing a good work in the eyes of some, or in the eyes of many. There are many other examples I can point to, where warning signs are tuned out, where inconsistencies are papered over. Because how could that preacher be doing behind closed doors something so opposite to what he's proclaiming in public? It's very hard to go against peer pressure. It's very hard to go against the crowd. It's very hard to imagine that the beautiful image you see is fake. It's very painful to think that a Christian might have failed or might be a liar. There's a great danger in always doing the easy thing. There's a great danger in tuning out warning signs and putting out of mind the hard things, the uncomfortable things. We can talk also not just of Ravi, but of other men that perhaps are a bit closer to some of us, maybe, I don't know. Jonathan Fletcher, John Smythe, Steve Timmis, and more. It's a painful topic. It always feels difficult, having talked of that issue, to talk of anything else, but we should think of other things too. As we think of this question, the danger of doing the easy thing. It's worth asking sometimes, how similar is your life to everyone else's life? If this is a fallen world, if we are in an increasingly ungodly nation, then we should be standing out more and more. Over the last 30, 40 years, there have been very rapid changes in our land. Certain sins have been increasingly celebrated. Our society seems to be increasingly inventing ways of doing evil. Good things are less and less regarded. And so, Christians, we should be more noticeably different. Our society, I think, seems to want to build a perverted version of heaven on earth. It idolises romance and career and this life and self and pride. Christian, do you think enough about how society is catechizing you to worship its folly? Do you think what influences feed into your mind? What things do you listen to? What things do you watch? What things are your friends going on about? It's very easy to go along with the crowd. It's very easy, if you don't pause and reflect, to find yourself in a very strange place. I had a conversation the other day where I was reminded that it was only in 2015 that homosexual marriage as a concept was introduced in this nation in law. That's 11 years ago. And now, in almost any public media in our country, in almost any big and public conversation, it's an absolutely unquestionable feature of society. That's just one example. There are so many more. "11 years ago, it was a weird, controversial idea. Now it's very weird if you disagree." Where else has the conversation moved that rapidly? I think the conversation has moved that rapidly in the way people think about job and career, in the way people think about family, in the way people think about education and other things too. And I'm not going to go into lots of specifics this evening, but I just want to invite you to think. There's a great danger in doing the easy thing. It's very easy to be carried along by the crowd. It's worth saying, to some degree, the same in the church. Yes, there's a great danger in the society out there, but in the church, are we so focused on the apparent conversation of the last 6 months Would a Christian from 10 years ago recognise where we're at today? It's a question it's worth asking. I'm not saying the answer's no. C.S. Lewis made a helpful comment about the importance of reading very old books because they will challenge your assumptions. He talks about the clean breeze of the centuries blowing through because you don't even know what it is that everyone's assuming today. Now, someone in 50 years' time will be able to look back and notice it, but we don't have the resources from 50 years' time. So let's go to the past and see the contrast and see the difference. What is there in our theology that's out of step with what you might have read 200 years ago, 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago? What is there in our practice, in how we worship, that might be different? What is there in our priorities? Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? It might be a good change. But it's worth asking the question, because it's easy always just to default to what everyone's doing. And when Zeresh did that, it was a disaster. And when Herod went along with not changing course, it was a disaster. So we're thinking, what message is society feeding you about work? What message is society feeding you about romance? What message is society feeding you about the role of the doctor? What message is society feeding you about education? What message is the society feeding you about politics and media and entertainment? It's not necessarily all wrong. In fact, a lot of it might be fine. But you should always ask, how should turning from the idols of our society affect our lives? What lies, what nonsense, what falsehoods might we have been swept along in the currents with? And if we don't stop to ask, we might not even know. Maybe there's a little voice in the back of your mind that you've been tuning out. I've been very abstract in these sweeping comments. And it's not my intention tonight to make any specific suggestions, but rather just to hold up these examples. Look at Zeresh, look at Herod, look at the people who just did what was easy, and then it was too late. Pause and reflect. There is a great danger in doing the easy thing. Just as to turn to Christ, to say that life is not about myself, that life is not about now, but it's about eternity, and I should therefore cling to him above all else, that is a difficult thing in some ways. In some ways it's very easy. Salvation's a gift. Come receive it. And yet there's that act of saying it's not about me, of giving up my pride, and that can be quite difficult. Just as that is quite difficult, it can be quite difficult to pause and think, maybe half of what I've just heard on the news is a load of nonsense. Or maybe the message of this film I enjoy is very destructive. Or maybe the way my friends think is causing a great deal of harm. There's great danger in doing the easy thing. It's very easy to go along with lies, nonsense and falsehoods that others are going along with. Let's pause and reflect and think and ask, do we even know?